What's going on, everybody? So tonight we're going to be doing a full review of the HOKA SKYFLOW. This is a neutral road running shoe from HOKA, and it is one of their newer shoes for 2024. And I gotta say, it is actually kind of confusing. I'm not sure where to put into categories for this shoe. Is it a speedy shoe? Is it a long, slow distance shoe? Is it everything? I went into this with these preconceived notions that this shoe is just going to be all over the place and not really know what it is. But I gotta say, I'm actually pretty well impressed with how it actually performed. My understanding for the shoe is it's basically a nice super critical EVA midsole with a nice amount of stack that is designed for a lot of forgiveness, a lot of cushion, and designed to go the distance. It does have some characteristics to go a little bit fast, but we will get into that into this review. It's all over the place, and I'm just starting with that because it feels like a Clifton meets Mach meets Bondi all in one to come up with the HOKA SKYFLOW. And then one more thing before we jump into the review, I feel that the Clifton and the Bondi, I work in healthcare, they're on everybody's feet as far as nursing goes. No offense to HOKA and no offense to healthcare, but I'm just saying that you see a lot of those models going to kind of that lifestyle lane. And then here comes the SKYFLOW and the Skyward X, which we can talk about later. And I think they're just, you know, making their way in the running specific community again. All right, without further ado, let's jump right into the review. And so let's actually start with the upper. The ventilation is not very good in this shoe. It's not super duper stretchy. It actually has a little bit of like a texture to it, but not terribly, just over the top of the toes here, kind of moving around to some of the sides. It, you know, again has a little bit of structural rigidity, which is not terrible, especially after the miles kind of add up and everything. You're not having to, you know, have your foot shifting around, and you're not having an upper that is terribly loose and allowing too much in the way of movement. So good job, HOKA, there. Taking a look at the laces are fairly moderately padded. And do they have any stretch to them? Not a ton of stretch at all. So the thing that I mentioned the other day was this tongue, and I thought that it was kind of on the short side. Well, leave it to HOKA to actually come up with a plan for this, and they did. So I was pleasantly surprised with the tongue being how thick it is. And by the way, it's fully gusseted on both sides. It does not come way the heck up here like Nova Blast, for example. That is a large amount of tongue, but is a totally different picture and everything. I'm talking about material as far as tongues of the shoe, and this one does not come up very far at all. It's not super duper curved, it's kind of on the flat side, but what it does when it works with this heel counter here, we'll get into that in a second, is it actually works with the front of the foot, and as you're kind of going off, and especially during some downhill where that foot is wanting to go forward, it is kind of nicely held in place, and your foot is secure by way of the tongue, the laces, and the heel counter. So some of my shoes, I do notice that whenever I go downhill especially, and this makes sense, that my foot slides forward, almost to the point that I feel my toes getting very, very restricted. And in some cases, especially after long distances or I've just been doing a lot of training that week, I want to do hills because that's just what I do, but I don't necessarily need that pounding, especially into the first toe, because that lasts all day and it's not comfortable. Well, HOKA actually kind of got that squared away, and I'm very, very impressed as far as that goes. You feel locked in, you feel very secure. And so looking at the heel counter is fairly rigid. There's not any bending at all. It's fairly padded. There's a nice little, what they call it, the elf ear, elf shoe, whatever, and a nice little heel tab. But basically it's got a nice little area for your calcaneus, your heel bone, to stick into, and it's got a very large amount of plush padding going on just on top. And once you engage the runner's knot, that's when the shoe became alive. So when I took it out for a run earlier, I did not have the runner's loop engaged. I had just the regular way it came from the factory. I wanted to see how it felt. And sure enough, my right foot was just slipping in the heel. Not terrible. I could have done it, but then I started to do some hills, and there on your screen, you can see me stopping and engaging the runner's loop here. And oh my gosh, it went from like first gear, like down to fifth gear, like over the course of like 30 seconds, this shoe became alive. It became alive, and once it was locked onto the foot, man, we were off to the races. And by races, I mean like a nice moderate pace, because it was just a daily training run, but it was a huge noticeable difference. And taking a look inside the shoe, there is material for the heel that just kind of works its way around, I'd say about just a little under halfway through the shoe. It kind of does this U shape around the heel, which is nice. And it's got just this like really nice to the touch material, especially 360 degrees around the heel collar. Not as much as say like a V5 from New Balance, but it is there and it is noticeable. But again, it works very well with this very luxurious and plush tongue. Having a feel inside, I'm feeling around where the first toe sets. When I first put this shoe on, I did feel a little bit of constriction in kind of that midfoot. I felt that it was not too tight, but very snug actually. And that was even before, you know, lacing up and going for a run. It was just me testing it out before really getting running with it. And I did notice that. But actually that kind of relaxed as the run went on. And taking a feel of the toe box here, it's got a little bit of rigidity. You know, it's not super duper firm, but you know, it's got enough to keep that material off of those toes. And then over here where the fifth toe, the pinky toe hangs out, I don't feel a lot of pinching and pulling areas for your pinky to get rubbed, but that will be determined over the course of the next 100 miles or so. Taking out the insert of the shoe, oh my gosh, take a look at this. HOKA, you did it again. There it is, SKYFLOW on your screen. The attention to detail with the inserts here, you know, take a look at that. You've got a nice area for your heel to sit in. There's your arch, comes all the way down to that big toe and then wraps around, and then around the base of your fifth metatarsal is where you get this little area here. I would just be careful, this little area here, if you have any kind of issues with that fifth toe, say it's like rotated and you have maybe like a little bunionette, this can actually ride on this area of the insert of the shoe. That's kind of why I harp on this issue so much, is because those are kind of some of the hot spots that people can get callus and break down and all that stuff, and we don't want that. Feeling the inside underneath the insert of the shoe, it's got a little bit of a texture to it to provide a little bit of friction, which is nice, because I can remember there have been times where it's been running shoe and the insert and the two materials were like quite slick, and it wasn't great. It was just all over the place and slipping and sliding and whatever. And actually that does go in quite nicely, whereas some of them, you know, you kind of got to fight and wrestle with it and have it bunching up, and that is not the case with the SKYFLOW here. Cool, very good. And you know, I talked about ventilation here. It felt, you know, not great, but I mean, you can see a lot of light coming through. So if that is your jam, that is your jam. Let's move into the midsole here. So we have a supercritical EVA that works very well in conjunction with the upper and the outsole, which we'll get into in a second. I mentioned that whenever I laced up that runner's knot, it really became alive. This thing, it became poppy and zesty and oh so alive. Not like a super speeder shoe, but definitely not a sleepy shoe at all. So it's coming in at 40 millimeters in heel and 35 in the forefoot with a 5 millimeter drop. Let's pop this men's size 11 on a scale and see what it weighs. All right, men's size 11 going on, and we are right at 11 ounces. So the men's size 11 weighs 11 ounces. How about that? 11, that's pretty fun. But yeah, this midsole, it definitely felt like it had some energy to it. It was about like a half caffeinated cup of coffee. It wasn't like zesty, it wasn't super duper alive, but it was not falling asleep. I'm telling you, this shoe, I feel, it just encouraged me to continue to want to run. My legs did not feel at all super duper fatigued. I actually went on a double today, meaning I went my double distance, and I gotta say, HOKA, you did a good job here. So taking a look at some of the geometry of the midsole, HOKA, I have noticed, you know, they just have these wicked big, especially medial size of the midsole that comes straight down. It doesn't have like any kind of curve you know, to it like some of these other ones here. It just is, it seems like it just goes straight down, plop. Like here's this, and you know, you can just see how straight it is, straight across it is. So I have a tendency to supinate, meaning I come down hard on the side of my shoe. There in your screen, you can kind of see how the front of my foot looks whenever it lands. And so when I was running and I was looking down, I noticed that, you know, there's quite a bit of motion, slam, slam, slam of the shoe towards the ground. And I'm thinking that, you know, it's going to come down, it's going to slam, and then it's going to put a lot of tension on the medial inside portion of my ankle and everything. But I didn't feel any different. So what I think it is just the way that the geometry and the visuals of the shoe looks. It looks to have a lot more motion than it probably actually does. Granted, now that this stack is so super duper high, now you got to remember that your foot is actually way up here in the air. And so there is going to be some exaggerated movement, especially around the bones and the joints and everything, considering that stack height. But I wouldn't fault it for being super unstable or too rough around the edges, because one, it didn't feel that way, and two, it's just probably the same amount of motion that you're getting with all your other shoes. It's just more visualized in some of these, especially bright colors, and just the way that it looks. And I noticed that during the run today. What I did feel was it was very comfortable, actually. Moving outside to the outsole here, we have quite a bit of strategically placed rubber, not as much as some of that Skyward, which we'll talk about in a future video, but you can definitely see that they kind of were deliberate in where they place the rubber. There is a nice groove here in the center, not all the way back, and it's not super duper deep. And there's a nice little, you know, cushy little half trampoline. There's a half trampoline here going on in the front. The price of this is $160, and I'll put the prices of the Clifton, the Bondi, and the Mach on the screen now. Okay, we can kind of see how this ranks. But this is a little bit more of a premium shoe, I would say, just given the materials, the overall construction, and just how it feels a little bit more durable, plus the big old slab of foam. It is a lot, and I can expect this to last quite a long time. So we will continue to test this shoe. We will pop it up for we'll try a 25, a 50, and a 100 mile follow-up review. I think that'd be kind of fun for all of our shoes here on the channel, and just see how things are holding up. And that is it for the HOKA SKYFLOW. I appreciate everybody watching. If you would not mind, please click like on this video, especially if it brought you value, and subscribe to the channel for future videos. I will have a link for this shoe down in the description if you want to check that out. I really appreciate it. That's all for now. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful night.